you've had quite the journey in the game of golf. I've got to
Yeah.
start with your days playing at Arkansas State. What were just some of your favorite memories playing for the Red Wolves?
Yeah, I mean, I would say some of my, favorite memories for playing for the Red Wolves would just be, the friends that I made, the teammates, that became friends as well. And yeah, just kind of being involved in the community and, serving the community sometimes and just, getting to kind of, make Jonesboro a second home. So
How did you get involved with World Long Drive? How did that origin story start for you?
yeah, so the origin story is kind of funny. So I, graduated during COVID, so I was a 2020 grad. So my golf career kind of ended pretty abruptly. And so that was really hard to, deal with and kind of move forward from because you spend so much time on a sport and then all of a sudden it's over. So I didn't pick up a golf club for about 6 months. And obviously we were in, the middle of COVID, so it was kind of hard to as well. And I actually moved out to Colorado where I live now to start a full-time job after graduating in 2020 from Arkansas State. And I got asked to play in a scramble with my company at the time. And I'm like, okay, that would be a good first thing. After finishing golf, it'll be fun, no pressure. And I got to play, in that scramble and I teed off on one hole and I basically drove the green and I accidentally almost hit a guy. And I went up there to apologize. I felt super bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm still getting used to the elevation change. I'm hitting it a little further out here. And he was just super impressed. And he was actually a long driver. His name is Andrew Eigner. He's actually the amateur world champion. So I accidentally hit into him. I apologized. And he's like, hey, don't say sorry. I'm really curious. I'd love to see, some of your numbers, how fast you are, things like that. So we met up a couple months later and I was nervous. I'm like, there's no way, I'm going to be very impressive. And he was really impressed with my numbers, like my ball speed, my club head speed. And he said to me, he said, I think you could be top 10 women in the world without even practicing. And so I'm like, you're crazy. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And then I tried it. And my first full year was last year. And I won 2 tour events as well as the world championships. So
I mean, it's I was like going back looking through your rookie season. I mean, what was that moment like where, you were watching, I think I was watching the broadcast and they were saying you were watching WLD events and now you're going up against some of the top players in the world.
yeah. Yeah, it was a really cool experience because I remembered even before playing college golf, when I was in high school and I was living at home in Illinois where I grew up, I used to watch World Long Drive on the Golf Channel with my dad. Like we just found it so entertaining. I always loved my drivers, always my favorite club. And so I used to watch with my dad and we would kind of joke about it like, "Oh, maybe I'll try it one day," but it was honestly never something that I thought I would actually do. So, kind of watching it with my dad and then going through my own experience and getting involved in it and then finding success in it pretty quickly was a really, really cool experience.
Just what is like, I'm sure you get asked this question every single time you step on a golf course. What is the secret? What like are some of the keys to a long drive?
Ooh, okay. So some of the keys to a long drive, I would say when it comes to the sport of long drive, especially, I think what I do well is I harness my emotions really well. It's not traditional golf where the biggest goal is to stay even keel the whole time and, control your emotions. And honestly, I have a lot of fun with getting myself amped up and feeling the adrenaline and really like leaning into that aspect of it. So I know that I do that well. And honestly, my experience in golf totally helps just the natural, tempo of hitting a golf ball. So that certainly helps. But I've worked a lot on gaining club head speed, which helps you gain ball speed. And it's not just swinging fast, it's a lot of mechanics. So, and it actually becomes harder once you're swinging faster to have proper swing mechanics. So, some tips for me would be, speed training, getting your club head speed up, working on hitting the center of the club face. It sounds super simple, but when you're swinging it faster, it actually becomes even harder to hit the center of the club face. And then honestly, just letting your body take over and not overthinking it. I think that when it comes to the driver, the first thing people think is I have to like hit it hard, but really it's about sequencing your body correctly and optimizing your impact, and that, results in longer drives.
I gotta ask you about the world championship last year.
Yeah.
What was just those emotions going through bracket play, and then you get to the finals, and it was such an odd sequence where you needed
Mhm.
one ball to hit the grid to win the world title.
Yeah. So, when it comes to the finals, that actual final round where my opponent, Phyllis, she ended up going OB. So all I had to, hit was one ball in. It's kind of misleading because people see it and they're like, oh my gosh, she won with that drive. That's crazy. But they don't see everything that leads up to it. And, my longest drive of the tournament was actually 361. So that was my longest of the tournament. And it's kind of one of those things where it is a sport and it does involve strategy. And, I could have gone up there and tried to hit my longest drive of my entire life and hit my last three balls OB. And then here we are again hitting more golf balls. So when I'm in that moment and I'm like, okay, my goal here is to win the world championship. All I have to do is get a ball in the grid. I just stood up there and I hit a golf shot, because I know how to hit a golf shot. I've done it for 12 plus years. It doesn't need to be fancy. The goal is to win the world championship. So I did what I had to do in that moment to win it. So
I talked to Coach Shaw yesterday because I was working on, working on a story just on state of the A State program, and she told me about a time you almost drove the green. I think it was like one of your practice rounds or something like that. Is that a
yeah.
story that kind of you recall? Kind of.
Yes, yes. I remember, yeah. So it's hole 10 at Sage Meadows. I know exactly which hole she's talking about. Because, my relationship with my driver in college was a funny one. Me and coach, we used to talk about it all the time on whether to use my driver or not, because I had so much distance to a point that at times it wasn't helping me. Because on hole 10 at Sage Meadows, if you've ever played there, there is a green side water. So I literally hit it so far that I hit it into the water. So it was one of those things where you're like, wow, I'm so glad that, I hit it this far, but then, I have to take a penalty stroke for that. It's so backwards. So it was, one of those times where it's like, gosh darn, if only I had gotten it a little bit more left. So
What's the longest drive you've ever hit?
So the longest drive I've ever hit was actually at my most recent competition here in Colorado. My new PR, my personal record, is 378 yards. So
Just what was that moment like when you connected? Obviously, you got TrackMan and all these stats that
Mhm.
you're looking at. What was that moment like going through your head when you set APR? What does that feel?
Yeah. The crazy thing about the times that I've set PRs, it's actually just when I'm feeling really smooth and really confident. And that's the thing that I think, a lot of people could take away from something like long drive is it's not always the drives where you're swinging the fastest. It's the ones where your technique is as good as it can be at also a high speed. So it was actually like my first or second ball in my very first set of the entire competition that I set my PR. I was just out there like, let me get one in the grid because you have to be accurate as well. A lot of people think we're just meatheads who, swing the ball and hit it really far with no, line that we have to keep it on, but we do have to keep it within a grid, which is pretty much an average fairway. So you do have to be accurate as well. And I was just up there like, I'm just going to hit a smooth one out there, get a number on the board, and it was a PR. So sometimes it's the smoothest shots.
Last question, just what are just some of the things you just want to work on the rest of the season?
Yeah, I would say something that I've worked a lot on and really have improved upon in the off season and even in the beginning of this season is really just my consistency and my accuracy. And kind of as I said before, long drive is sometimes perceived as a meathead sport of you're just hitting it far and it doesn't take much talent or much practice, but it really does take a lot of work and a lot of understanding swing mechanics in order to optimize your shots. And I've worked a lot on being more accurate, getting more balls in the grid, working on my consistency. And at the last event, I had a accuracy percentage of 57%. So that's really high when you're trying to hit a ball within basically a fairway at really high speeds. So getting my accuracy up is something that I'm going to continue to work on, as well as obviously that speed, because the speed ultimately helps you hit it further.